These are days and nights of venom and blood. Heroes will rise as the anchors fall.
What is up, YouTube? Dottz Gaming here, and today I am bringing you guys my beginner's guide to crafting in the Elder Scrolls Online. Now, the goal of this guide is to talk about crafting your first time around in the game. For new players, ESO's crafting system can feel very confusing and it's sometimes extremely overwhelming. But once you break it down piece by piece, it really isn't that bad. Now, this guide is going to assume that you basically have no knowledge of how crafting works in ESO. Now, I'm going to teach you guys almost from the ground up. But if you do have zero knowledge with how crafting works, I would recommend that you start off before even listening to this guide and looking through it by going to the Fighters Guild and the Mages Guild and completing the certification quests for all the professions. It will give you the absolute basics about what all the different professions do, and this guide will make a lot more sense if you have that knowledge under your belt. Now, if you do know how crafting works in ESO, I will display a time right here on the screen, so you could just skip to that time and bypass like the super beginner portion of the guide where I go over a lot of the basics of the different professions. Now, let's move into the crafting basics section of this guide. When you level up your crafting skills in ESO, you level up by gaining what's called inspiration points as opposed to experience. Now, there are three main types of armor and weapon crafting skills. You have your woodworking, your blacksmithing, and your clothing. Woodworking lets you create bows, staves, and shields. Clothing lets you create light and medium armor, and blacksmithing lets you create heavy armor and melee weapons. By completing the certification for these three professions, you will learn how to refine materials, create items, and as well as deconstruct them. The one thing I don't think they teach you about in this section is that weapons and armor have traits on them, which add beneficial buffs to the armor that your character gets while you wear them. Now, these traits can be researched with the exception of ornate and intricate, so that you can later craft gear and weapons with those traits on them. Now, this is extremely important, and it is an extremely important system in the game, and I will go further into it later on in the video, so keep it in mind. But I would recommend that if you're on PC, download the Research Assistant add-on. It puts an icon on an item in your bag that lets you know whether or not you have a trait on an item researched. And if the icon is orange, it means it's not researched. If it's gray, that means it is. And if it's yellow, that means that it is not researched, but you have a worse item in your possession that also has the trait as well, basically telling you that you don't need to save that specific item for research. Now, there are three types of crafting professions that allow you to create consumable items, aka one-time use items. Those are enchanting, alchemy, and provisioning. Enchanting allows you to create enchantments that buff your weapons and armor. Alchemy allows you to create potions to buff your character. Do note that potions can be used in combat. And provisioning allows you to create food or drink that also allow you to buff your character, but those are generally used outside of combat. By doing the certification quest for these three professions, you will learn about the different types of materials that need to be combined in order to successfully create an item for the respective profession. So now that you guys know what each profession does in a nutshell, or skill line, I'm used to saying professions from WoW, let's move into the part of the guide where I will teach you guys the best way to approach crafting your first time around. In my opinion, focusing on clothing, blacksmithing, and woodworking is probably more important for a new character than the consumable creation professions. Why, you ask? That is simply because the research is involved, like the actual the act of researching traits is involved, and not getting off to a good start on your research can put you way behind later if you eventually want to craft your own gear. Research timers get exponentially longer as you research more and more traits for a specific gear or weapon type for a specific slot, so you want to make sure you start those as early as you can so that you can just continually research as you level. So by the time you reach the end of the game, if you do want to craft, you will have a good amount of traits to pick from, and you'll be able to create item sets that require a certain amount of traits for that specific item researched. Now, when it comes to time to deciding what gear I want to research or sell or wear, I've basically been using the following rule of thumb. Does it have the intricate trait on it, which is a non-researchable trait, might I add, that basically lets items that are deconstructed give you significantly more experience. If it has that, I obviously deconstruct it. You're going to get massive amounts of inspiration points for that item in your respecting crafting line, and you always want to deconstruct those items. Next, I check if it has the ornate trait on it, which is another non-researchable one that allows items sold to generate 285% additional gold when you sell it to a vendor. So obviously, I will vendor those. If it doesn't have that, I look at the item to see if I can use it, as in, is it better than the item I have in its corresponding slot? If so, I keep it and wear it. If not, and I think it's valuable, which will generally be a superior item or better, I'll sell it on the guild trader. I've been actually able to make some pretty good money off of selling the occasional epic item that I can't use. If it isn't the most valuable piece in the world, I'll see if I have the trait on the item researched, and then if I do, I will just deconstruct it. But if the item is not researched yet, like if the trait that's on the item isn't researched, I'll put it in the bank and save it for research time. Now that's my little tidbit about research and how I decide what to research, but what is actually the best way to level up all of these skill lines? For blacksmithing and clothing and woodworking, deconstructing items that you did not craft is the best way to accrue inspiration points. That is why knowing what gear you have to save for research and what you can safely deconstruct is critical to leveling these skill lines up, because you do not want to deconstruct gear that you need for research. Crafting actual gear does give some experience, but it is greatly outshined by deconstructing gear. Unfortunately though, deconstructing gear that you created does not give a lot of inspiration points. I was super hopeful that it would when I first started, but unfortunately it does not. So doing plenty of dungeons to collect gear and deconstructing whatever items you can is easily the fastest way to level these three up. For alchemy and provisioning, the best way to level these ones up is to actually create stuff. So make potions, food, and drinks. For enchanting, while creating glyphs, not gifts, while creating glyphs is still a good method of leveling, deconstructing them will still give you the most experience, very similar to the other three professions I mentioned previously. When it comes to creating items though, like with alchemy and provisioning, there's a certain balance that you need to find between which materials will give you the best net gain of inspiration points while not hurting your coin purse too much. There are plenty of guides online as to what the best way to level these two professions quickly and efficiently is, and those guides are relatively easy to find, and you can just find them very quickly through a nice Google search. But my thought process for leveling those up has been collect whatever materials I can find through my adventures. So like I said, for enchanting, alchemy, and provisioning, I will basically collect whatever I find through my adventures. And whenever I come back to a main town, I combine those materials and create stuff. And if I have any enchantments that I can't use or are useless to me, like I'm playing a Magicka character, so if I have any stamina enchantments or occasionally a health enchantment, I'll just deconstruct those and gain massive experience from it. Once I get to the end of the game though, I'll look up a guide just like I mentioned and focus on the best combination of materials to buy that will give me the best net game experience for alchemy and provisioning. Because like I said, right now I'm focusing more on my blacksmithing, clothing, and woodworking through research and deconstructing stuff. But once I get to the actual end of the game, I'm going to take time to figure out what's the most efficient way to level up alchemy and provisioning, like what materials are the best to get to give me the most net gain experience, and I'll actually create stuff. But like I said, as of now, I'm just using whatever I find throughout the world. So that is how I've been approaching the different crafting skill lines, guys, throughout my leveling process. If you have any questions about crafting, leveling it up, or anything ESO related, please leave a comment below and I will be happy to help you. If you like this video, of course, please smash that like button and please subscribe. Thanks again for watching. I'm Dottz Gaming, and I'll see you guys next time.